So when should you put a comic in your pull box? When do you know it's going to be good enough to actually subscribe and hop on that train? Um, and I'm not talking a one-off, like I want this issue. I'm talking about an ongoing subscription. Well, let me tell you some things I've heard over the years, see if any of it works for you. Hey there, this is Perch. The comic book subscription pull box, some people don't know what that is, but that's basically when you go into your comic store and you say, I really like the Hulk. I'd like to not have to worry about missing it every month. I don't want to come and ask, month by month for an issue. So just put the Hulk into my box every single month as a subscription. I want it there, and they will happily oblige you. You will get what you want. And so that's a thing. That's probably the primary use of a pull box or subscriptions. And it's something where I always tell people you should make sure this is what you want, because when you put something into a subscription pull box, granted, you can get kind of one issue of it and say, oh my God, this is terrible, cancel it for me. But you are at that point sticking your comic store with like two or three extra issues. And, or maybe, sometimes they'll make you buy those issues. You're like, well, you subscribed and now you're saying no, but I've already ordered the next two issues for you. So you're going to need to pick those up. Or the comic store lets you out of, but then they've got more stock to sell, and that's not a cool thing to do for your comic shop generally. So I think that the way to handle subscriptions is, first of all, don't jump into it too quickly. Make sure you actually want this. It is not skin off the nose of any comic shop to say, hey, tell them what you're doing. I'm thinking I may subscribe to this new Fantastic Four. I've been wanting a Fantastic Four issue for some time. Man, that artist is incredible. And Dan Slott, Dan Slott has written some. I liked his Silver Surfer. Didn't like his Spider-Man, but his Silver Surfer was cool, and Fantastic Four is probably closer to Silver Surfer than Spider-Man, right? So how could I go wrong? Let's put this comic into my box. Just go and say, I'm thinking about it. Can I just reserve the first three issues, for example? That's something you can do, and the comic store will happily do it. And then you're not on the hook when issue number one comes up, and you're like, oh my God, why? What the hell is this? And you can just opt back out again. I think that's a very legit thing to do. Another way to do it, and by the way, you might say, well, what if those first three issues were awesome? And you're like, yeah, I want to subscribe to this. Every comic shop will happily add you and take a comic out of their shelf stock to put in your box. And if they have to get more, they'll figure out how to get more. That's a good problem for the comic shop to have. Go ahead and give them that problem. But the other way around is far more painful. So don't subscribe long term unless you really think you're in for long haul. Now, granted, the publisher in the comic could do random things. It could suddenly change a creative team and take a big element of something you like about the comic off the table, and then you're stuck with like, hey, this comic changed. Yeah, in that case, stop getting it. But generally speaking, I think once you know what you're getting, that's a good way to go. The other way to think about it, and I tell this to people just to help them think through it. Maybe I've cost some sales this way, to say, hey, you want to subscribe to this comic. Well, for 1 year, this comic is $3.99. Okay, so that's about $48 and change that you're going to be paying in a year for this comic. Is this a comic you really want? And I think that sometimes that forces the person to think about it a little bit and go, yeah, I do want this. And why I think it's a good approach, it's taken sales away, I'm certain of it, but it also has saved for future problems. As I've talked about in other videos, predictability is the number one thing for a comic shop, to be able to know kind of what's going to sell, what's going to move, when and where. That's the comic shop's bread and butter. That's what they need to really do well. So being able to predict that and give your comic shop some predictability there is not only you being a great customer, you helping yourself, it also is helping the shop. So being able to tell somebody, look, $48, it helps them to think about, hey, yeah, okay, I'm in this. And then they're more likely, once they understand more of the details, to stay committed, as opposed to, kind of randomly changing their mind later. They feel like they got more warning, therefore they were more informed, therefore, they're less likely to hop in and hop out. If you find yourself constantly adding things or removing things from your pull box subscription list, consider starting to do more just single issues. Just say, I want the next issue or the next 5 issues, whatever it happens to be. Going in and saying, and you're constantly maneuvering around your subscription is just a pain in the butt for everybody for some of the reasons that we mentioned earlier. Um, Generally speaking, I mean, the problem with the comic industry right now is that it's in a rough spot where over the next year or more, you're likely to see most of the titles relaunched. It's unusual for a title to get above 24. And why that number was like if a comic is coming out every month, that's the 2 year mark. 24 is pretty, at that point you're like, wow, this comic is long in the tooth. And I'm talking, relaunch 24, not, Iron Man 18 Legacy issue 744. It's like, but you relaunched 18 issues ago. That's what we're going to be counting here for the moment. So having to constantly juggle that is a pain. And also be aware that when you do put a comic in your subscription box and the publisher decides to renew it, relaunch it, either you're going to be getting it automatically. The comic shop's just going to roll you over as well into this new series, which may or may not be a good thing if you're like, I signed up for Deadpool with Scotty Young. I did not sign up for Deadpool with Kelly Thompson. So you may not want it to roll over, so you have to keep on top of that. But in addition, it's, I mean, these things are just turning over very, very rapidly. It's just that may not be what you want to do. So I think subscriptions are great. Obviously, that's how a lot of comic shops make their money. It goes back to that predictability thing. They know the volume of comics they want to sell month in, month out. But it's not all great. There's some definite problems with it, especially if you don't really think through what it's going to mean. So anyway, there you go. That's my thoughts on a poll box and subscription. Is it good for you? Leave me your thoughts below, your comments. Would love to hear them. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications if you'd like to be bothered. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.